There are people who do not just prefer order. They feel uneasy without it. You can see it in small moments. They watch someone else cook and immediately notice everything that feels off. The knife angle, the pacing, the lack of structure. And before they even speak, their body is already tense. Or they plan a trip carefully down to the smallest detail. Then one thing changes. A delay, a weather shift, a cancelled reservation. And suddenly it feels like more than inconvenience. It feels like instability. From the outside, this can look like perfectionism, or stubbornness, or a difficult personality. But often, it is something else. For some people, control is not about superiority. It is about safety. Their mind does not experience uncertainty as neutral. It experiences uncertainty as a risk. That idea is actually supported by psychology research. Studies on intolerance of uncertainty describe it as a broad vulnerability factor in anxiety, meaning some people react to uncertainty more negatively and more intensely than others. So when life becomes unclear, their system does not say, "Let's see what happens." It says, "Fix this before it turns into something worse." That is why control can feel relieving. Making the plan helps. Checking twice helps. Taking charge helps. Knowing the outcome helps, not because they love power, but because predictability gives their nervous system something to stand on. And over time, that relief becomes reinforcing. The mind learns a simple equation. Certainty equals calm. Uncertainty equals exposure. That is where the pattern starts to deepen. These people often become highly capable adults. They prepare early. They catch mistakes. They notice weak points before anyone else does. They are reliable under pressure because pressure feels familiar. At work, they can look impressive. They are organized, competent, and hard to surprise. They often respect skill more than status because competence feels safer than empty authority. So yes, this trait has strengths, but it also has a cost. Because a mind that is trained to prevent problems does not rest easily. It stays alert. It scans. It rehearses. It tightens around the future. That creates a strange paradox. The person who looks the most composed can be carrying the most internal tension. The person others depend on can quietly feel exhausted by how much they feel responsible for. And relationships make this even harder because relationships are unpredictable by nature. People change moods, forget details, misread signals, need space, say one thing and feel another. No amount of planning can fully organize another human being. So when someone relies on control to feel safe, closeness can become complicated. They may ask more questions than other people, need clearer answers, feel unsettled by vague communication, struggle to delegate emotional trust, not because they want to dominate, but because ambiguity creates stress, and that stress can slowly distort connection. The other person may start to feel managed instead of understood, corrected instead of accepted, watched instead of trusted. Then the controlling person notices the distance. And because distance feels dangerous, they often respond the only way they know how, by tightening further. More monitoring, more fixing, more effort. That is how control can become a loop. It tries to protect connection, but can end up suffocating it. This pattern rarely appears out of nowhere. In many cases, it begins much earlier. Research on childhood unpredictability shows that growing up in environments that feel unstable, uncertain, or uncontrollable can shape later health and behavior, even beyond other adversity measures like poverty or standard ACE categories. That kind of childhood is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply inconsistent. Maybe the emotional climate at home changed quickly. Maybe support was available one day and missing the next. Maybe routines kept shifting. Maybe the adults around you were hard to read. Maybe you learned very early that peace could disappear without warning. A child in that environment starts adapting. They pay attention to tone, to silence, to timing, to subtle changes in the room. They do not become controlling overnight. They become observant first. And that makes sense. A major review on childhood stress describes how early stress can increase threat vigilance, mistrust, and difficulties in relationships later in life. In other words, when the early environment feels unsafe or unstable, the mind often becomes better at scanning for danger. So what people later call control issues may begin as a survival skill. The child learns, stay ahead, notice everything, do not get caught off guard. Then adulthood arrives, but the old strategy remains. Now it shows up as overplanning, perfectionistic standards, difficulty relaxing, difficulty trusting, a strong need to know where things are going. This is why shame usually does not fix the problem. Telling someone like this to just relax misses the point. Because the behavior is not random, it is protective. The real question is not, why are you so controlling? The real question is, what does control do for you? Does it make disappointment feel less likely? Does it make chaos feel more distant? Does it protect you from helplessness? Does it keep old fear from rising back to the surface? That is where understanding begins. And healing does not mean becoming careless. It does not mean losing your standards. It does not mean pretending uncertainty feels easy. It means building safety in new ways. Through trust. Through emotional flexibility. Through relationships that can survive imperfection. Through learning that not every unknown becomes a disaster. That shift matters. Because control can organize your schedule. It can improve your work. It can even protect you in genuinely chaotic situations. But it cannot give you permanent peace. Peace comes from something deeper. From knowing that even when life moves off script, you are still able to meet it. That even when someone disappoints you, you can remain grounded. That even when the future is unclear, you do not disappear inside the fear. So if you recognize yourself in this pattern, the answer is not to hate that part of you. That part of you is trying to help. It learned to create order when life once felt unreliable. It learned to stay alert when uncertainty felt expensive. It learned to grip the wheel because letting go once felt dangerous. There is intelligence in that. There is sensitivity in that. There is even care in that. But eventually, survival strategies can become too small for the life you are trying to live. And that is the real turning point. Not when you stop caring, not when you stop preparing, not when you become passive, but when control is no longer the only way you know how to feel safe. Because some people do not hold on so tightly because they love power. They hold on tightly because somewhere in their nervous system, unpredictability still feels personal.